Our Lady of Fatima revealed that the final battle between the kingdom of heaven and Satan is over marriage and the family. And if we want to win that battle, we have to understand what it means to be a Catholic man and a Catholic husband and father. Because right now there's a tremendous amount of confusion in and outside of the church of what it means to be a holy husband and father. So in this video, I'm going to go through what the church actually teaches about this and share some experiences from my own life that I think shed a tremendous amount of light on this. But before I do any of that, I want to tell a story from my own marriage. Shortly after we got married, my wife started to do this. She would come up to me after I'd had a long day of work and look at me and say, "What can I do better for you?" Or, "How can I serve you better?" And this was a groundbreaking question for me because she's going out of her way not just to satisfy a need that I presently have, but to try to accommodate my future needs and to try to make my life better, my schedule more fluid, my time more valuable. And what this did for me was it awakened something within me where I realized I should be doing the same for her. And so I started to ask her back, what could I do better for her? And I think this exemplifies a little bit of what Christian marriage ought to look like. My wife's tender care and devotion for me, trying to make my life better, awakened something within me so that I tried to do the same for her. Because there's a lot of talk about rights and marital duties and the role of the husband and the wife, and all that is good and true, and it's the foundation of any relationship. You have to have boundaries, you have to have rules in a relationship in order for it to work. But the letter kills and the spirit brings life. So we need to, as Christians, seek to go beyond just what's our duty as a husband and wife and seek to outdo one another in honoring each other. This is what the Bible has in mind. And this is not some highfalutin idea that's just for saints. This is not something that, oh, that's only for really holy couples. No, 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 no. This is God's plan for every Catholic marriage, that the husband and spouse seek to honor, love, cherish one another, both in their hearts and in their actions every single day of their life. So let's take a look at what the church actually teaches about what marriage is supposed to look like. Pope Leo XIII, on his encyclical on marriage, writes this: "There has been vouchsafed to the marriage union a higher and nobler purpose than was ever previously given to it. By the command of Christ, it not only looks to the propagation of the human race, but to bring forth children for the church, fellow citizens with the saints and the domestics of God, so that a people might be born and brought up for the worship and religion of the true God and our Savior Jesus Christ. Secondly, the mutual duties of husband and wife have been defined, and their several rights accurately established. They are bound, namely, to have such feelings for one another as to cherish always very great mutual love, to be ever faithful to their marriage vow, and to give one another an unfailing and unselfish help. The husband is the chief of the family and the head of the wife. The woman, because she is flesh of his flesh and bone of his bone, must be subject to her husband and obey him, not indeed as a servant, but as a companion, so that her obedience shall be wanting in neither honor nor dignity. Since the husband represents Christ, and since the wife represents the church, let there always be both in him who commands and in her who obeys a heaven-born love, guiding both in their respective duties. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. Therefore, as the church is subject to Christ, so also let wives be subject to their husbands in all things." So what the church is teaching here is a couple of things. One is that the rules of marriage are established by God himself, and they are not to be tinkered with. If you're going to marry someone, there are certain obligations that you are bound to fulfill as either a husband or a wife. And this is something that God himself has established, so it's not something that you or I or even the church can do away with. There are set rules to marriage that God himself has established. But even beyond that, the church teaches that husband and wife are bound to have such feelings for one another as to cherish always very great and mutual love, to be ever faithful to their marriage vow, and to give one another an unfailing and unselfish help. And this is why Paul in Ephesians 5, he commands husbands to love their wives. Because as men, it's much easier for us to focus on a legalistic tit-for-tat relationship with other individuals. It's much more difficult for us to give ourselves heart and soul into a relationship with another person. Women find that much easier, which is why St. Paul commands women, fear or respect your husbands, because women want to degrade the relationship in a certain sense to a more sentimental, emotional thing. So what's going on here is there's a complementarity between men and women, where men have down pat the more legalistic side of things, which is why certain YouTube channels that focus on the marital right and the obligations of women do quite well, because men are hardwired to think in a more legalistic and logical way, whereas women tend to think with the heart first and the head second. Men are the inverse of that. And so for women, they're commanded to respect, to fear their husbands in Ephesians 5, depending on the translation, whereas men are commanded to love their wives. The Bible is telling men to put their hearts in a more prominent place in the relationship, to love your wife, to cherish these feelings, this great mutual love, as the Pope is talking about here. And women are called to fear their husbands, to respect their husbands. So what's going on here? Well, if you're watching this video, I would encourage men to be more critical of themselves. I would encourage men to start to love their wives more, to go out of their way to please their wife. Buy flowers, buy chocolates, take her out for dinner, serve her, make dinner, whatever it is. Go out of your way, do something unnecessary for the sake of making her day better, and maybe even ask her, honey, what can I do to serve you better? What can I do to be a better husband for you? If you do that, I guarantee it's going to move her to reciprocate in the same direction. And if you're a wife watching this, be very, very careful about how you treat your husband. Respect him, honor him, love him as much as you can, and maybe go out of your way and say, honey, what can I do to make your life better? How can I be a better wife and mother to our children? What can I do for you? How can I inconvenience myself for you? Because if we take the focus off of what I'm supposed to get out of the marriage and start to focus on how much can I give in the marriage, then it radically revolutionizes that relationship in the holy name of Jesus. This is Christian love. This is Christian leadership. The greatest amongst you must count himself as the slave of all. And this type of love, it's contagious, it's evocative, it elevates everybody involved in the relationship. The next document I want to look at here comes from Pope Pius XI. It's called Casti Connubii, and it says this: domestic society being confirmed, therefore, by this bond of love, there should flourish in it that order of love, as St. Augustine calls it. This order includes both the primacy of the husband with regard to the wife and children, the ready subjection of the wife and her willing obedience, which the apostle commends in these words: let women be subject to their husbands as to the Lord, because the husband is the head of the wife, and Christ is the head of the church. This subjection, however, does not deny or take away the liberty which belongs to the woman, both in view of her dignity as a human person and in view of her most noble office as wife and mother and companion. Nor does it bid her obey her husband's every request, if not in harmony with right reason or with the dignity due to wife. Nor, in fine, does it imply that the wife should be on a level with those persons who in law are called minors, to whom it is not customary to allow free exercise of their rights on account of their lack of mature judgment, or of their ignorance of human affairs. But it forbids that exaggerated liberty, which cares not for the good of the family. It forbids that in this body, which is the family, the heart be separated from the head, to the great detriment of the whole body, and the proximate danger of ruin. For if the man is the head, the woman is the heart, and he occupies the chief place in ruling, so she may and ought to claim for herself the chief place in love. Again, the subjugation of wife to husband in its degree and manner may vary according to the different conditions of persons, place, and time. In fact, if the husband neglects his duty, it falls to the wife to take his place in directing the family. But the structure of the family and its fundamental law, established and confirmed by God, must always and everywhere be maintained intact. So what's the point here? Well, our wives should be our best friends. Our subordinates in a certain way, yes, absolutely. The man is the head of the family. The final authority goes to him. But our wives should not be treated as smart teenagers or as subordinates who we can just command around as slaves. Our wives are meant to be our companions. St. Paul says that the husband is the head and the wife is his flesh, his body, and that no man ever hates his own flesh but nourishes and cherishes it. This is the disposition that we ought to have towards our wives. We need to seek to please our wives. And I don't mean this happy wife. Listen, guys, look, There are so many things that you can say legalistically. There are so many ways that you can spin this in a negative light that are simply not helpful. If you're going to be talking about marriage, you're necessarily going to be talking about two people, a man and a woman. So when you're speaking about marriage, yes, you need to involve the legalistic rigor that's appealing to men so they know exactly what the boundaries are so they can determine who's in the right and who's in the wrong. But you're always speaking to women when you're speaking about marriage. You cannot have a marriage without a woman in it. And so it's necessary that you garner your speech with the appropriate amount of caution so that women who maybe don't know very much about the faith, who are watching your channel for the first time, who are just learning about what the church teaches about marriage, don't think they're entering into a slave-master relationship whenever they get married. You need to speak in such a way that the beauty of the sacrament of marriage evokes a response within women so that they want to be docile, so that they want to be led by a man of valor, a man of God who is going to be with them for the rest of their lives. It's very, very important we don't overemphasize this legalistic jargon to the detriment of the beauty of holy matrimony. Look, the legal stuff is good. It's very good, and it needs to be known by both men and women. That's a fact. Women don't know it well enough oftentimes. However, as men, we need to be the leaders, not just in our knowledge, but also in our charity, trying to lead our brides closer to Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Because if it is the case that the man stands to his wife in the same relationship as Christ to the church, it is your job as the man to sanctify your wife, not the other way around. Christ sanctifies the church does not sanctify Christ. We need to be very diligent about doing everything we can to lead with charity, to try to lead our wives closer to Jesus Christ, the Son of God, to talk about marriage in such a way where the beauty elicits change. The beauty itself evokes a greater level of holiness, and we don't have to focus constantly on, you are my slave, you are my servant, you must do what I say. I have the full disclosure in all matters of prudence, and you simply must sit down and shut up. This is not how we ought to talk about marriage as Christians. Because does the truth matter? Yes, it does. However, so does the tone. So does the medium. This is why people are so opposed to clown masses. It's because the medium doesn't match the message. There's something ludicrous accompanying the most sacred act on the planet. It is not good. It is not fitting. Whenever we're talking about marriage, it is not good to take a beautiful relationship that's meant to be the highest form of friendship and make it look as if it's a slave to master relationship. Make it look as if a woman's freedom, her ability to do anything outside the house, her ability to have her own life in a certain sense, or to have her own hobbies, is completely destroyed and diminished. No, marriage is meant to elevate the entire person. And if we talk about it in such a way where it's appealing to men because you gain this female slave in a certain sense, but it denigrates it to women, we are doing detriment to the entire organism, because every marriage necessarily consists of a man and a woman. So when we're discussing marriage, we have to be very nuanced with our language, because we're discussing a relationship that necessarily involves a male and a female. And additionally, even if we're only talking to males, we're talking about males who are going to take this knowledge and apply it in a relationship that involves a female. So we need to be very sure that we are teaching the truth, yes, 100%, with full rigor, what the popes have taught about the marital debt, what the popes have taught about women working, what the popes have taught about how women ought to dress. We need to be up to date on that, but at the same time, we need to present the message in such a way where it doesn't drive women away and scare them to get married in a Christian sense. So if you want to be a man after Christ's own heart, you have to learn how to balance truth and charity. You cannot sacrifice one for the other, and sometimes you're walking on a very, very thin line. But at the end of the day, Christian marriage is not meant to be a contest in authority, but a contest in honoring one another. And this should not be unrealistic. This should be the standard. You should love your wife so much that you are willing constantly to go out of your way to please her. And I'm not setting myself up as some sort of exemplar of this. I'm just saying that Christian marriage is meant to be beautiful. It's meant to be something that's so good that people look at it from the outside and say, I want that from my spouse. And this is why Our Lady of Fatima said the final battle between the kingdom of heaven and Satan is over marriage and the family. Satan at the beginning pitted a wife against her husband, and he's doing the same move now with great success. We as Christians with sacramental grace and a sacramental marriage need to overcome the devil and beat him at his own game. We need to make our marriages so good and beautiful and fruitful that the entire world looks at us with envy, saying, I want that. And ultimately, I want Jesus Christ. The last document I want to look at here is the Catechism of the Council of Trent. This is what it says about the duties of a husband. It is the duty of a husband to treat his wife generously and honorably. It should not be forgotten that Eve was called by Adam his companion. The woman, he says, whom thou gavest me as a companion. Hence, it was according to the opinion of some of the holy fathers that she was formed not from the feet, but from the side of man. On the other hand, she was not formed from his head, in order to give her to understand that it was not hers to command, but to obey. The husband should also be constantly occupied in some honest pursuit, with the view to provide necessaries for the support of his family and to avoid idleness, the root of almost every vice. He is also to keep all his family in order, to correct their morals and see if they faithfully discharge their duties. So what is a husband supposed to do? Provide, protect, teach, instruct, honor his spouse? This is why the Catechism says that some of the church fathers say that woman was not made from man's foot, so that it shows that he lords over her, he stands above her. And woman was not made from man's head, to show that woman is superior, woman is the head of man. No. In the scriptures, the Lord forms Eve from the side of Adam, from his middle. This, the church fathers say, is to signify that Adam and Eve are, in a certain sense, equals, not in authority, but in dignity. They are equally made in the image and likeness of God. And one does have the final say, one does have the authority in the Christian worldview, but that authority is for the sake of the common good and for the sake of the betterment of his subordinates. The Christian way of leading is to lay down your life for your friends. The Christian way of leading is to be the servant of all. And so in a certain sense, yes, the man has the final authority, the highest authority, but he also has the heaviest cross. He also has the obligation, the responsibility to sanctify not just himself, but his wife and his children, to provide for a family. This is a very heavy cross. And if this responsibility is wielded incorrectly, if it's abused, then the husband will pay for it for all of eternity, possibly. This is a heavy cross that we need to be very sober about as Catholic men. And here are the duties of a wife according to the Catechism of the Council of Trent. On the other hand, the duties of a wife are thus summed up by the Prince of the Apostles. Let wives be subject to their husbands, that if anyone believe not the word, they may be won without the word, by the conversation of the wives, considering your chaste conversation with fear. Let not their adorning be the outward plaiting of the hair, or the wearing of gold, or the putting on of apparel, but the hidden man of the heart, and the incorruptibility of a quiet and meek spirit, which is rich in the sight of God. For after this manner heretofore the holy women also who trusted God adorned themselves, being in subjection to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, to train their character in the practice of virtues, and to pay particular attention to their domestic concerns, should also be especial objects of their attention. The wife should love to remain at home unless compelled by necessity to go out, and she should never presume to leave home without her husband's consent. Again, and in this the conjugal union chiefly consists, let wives never forget that next to God they are to love their husbands, to esteem them above all others, yielding to them in all things not inconsistent with Christian piety, a willing and ready obedience. So we see here once again this idea that husbands need to treat their wives honorably and generously. Husbands need to love their wives. Husbands need to go out of their way to be charitable with their wives, to outdo one another in showing honor. Because the principal fault of husbands is to not love their wives enough, which is why St. Paul commands husbands, love your wives. He doesn't command wives to love your husbands because that's not the principal fault of women. Women will denigrate their husband's authority, going back to Genesis chapter 3. One of the curses of Eve is that her desire is for her husband, meaning what? Her desire is to have her husband's office. Her desire is to have the authority of her husband. So there are plenty of women who are falling into this vice, who are trying to usurp their husband's authority. So what does St. Paul say? St. Paul says, women, fear your husbands. Women, respect your husbands. And he even goes so far, St. Peter that is, goes so far as to praise Sarah because she called her husband Lord. So if you're a man and you're watching this, the emphasis always needs to be on loving your spouse and elevating her through your Christian charity and your love. And if you are a woman, the emphasis needs to be on you respecting your husband, respecting his commands, being obedient to him, being compliant, and outdoing each other in showing honor. So honestly, trying to please your husband in whatever way that you can. And let me just close by saying this. The final battle between the kingdom of heaven and Satan is over marriage and the family. And if you're a married person, your marriage is meant to exemplify to the entire world Christ's love for his church and the church's love for Christ. That is what your sacramental marriage is meant to convey to the entire world. I would encourage you to just ask yourself, how is my marriage signifying Christ's love for his church? If you're a husband, are you laying down your life for your wife and children? Are you making sacrifices? Are you praying for them? And as a wife, how are you being subject, being obedient to, being docile to your husband's not just commands, but his desires, his preferences? How much are you acting as the church and being receptive of the desires of your husband? These are things that we need to ask ourselves to stop pointing the finger outward and start pointing the finger at ourselves, because it's impossible to grow in any virtue without true humility. We need to start by asking ourselves, what can we give in the holy name of Jesus, and not what can I get in my own name for my own sake. And if you watch my channel much, you know I don't do this often, but I just had a baby 4 or 5 days ago. And so over the month of December, I'm going to be slowing down my work a little bit. So if you enjoy my channel, if you benefited from my videos, I would just ask you to please consider praying for me, first of all, but secondly, becoming a supporter on Buy Me a Coffee.